There's one subject I'm going to talk to you about today. It's going to be about the Chattanooga power structure. You ever heard that term? Heard people talk about the power structure? It's really why I wrote my book, Old Money, New South, was really to sort of examine in a very long, flowing, meandering, fun, many storytelling type way, is really to ask the question, is there a power structure? Who is the power structure? What do they do? Is it real? Is it not? Is it good? Is it bad? That's what my whole book is about. So I'll tell you some stories that are probably in the book, anecdotes, facts, figures that are probably in the book. But I'm going to just kind of go from my head. It's been 10 years since I wrote the book, so I might not get everything exactly right. But evidence for the fact that there is a power structure in Chattanooga, or I guess now you could say was, because there's ebb and flow. It's probably a lot less than it was. But one great story is when there was a big push, appropriately we're at the Bessie Smith Hall on what used to be 9th Street. There was a big push in Chattanooga in the late 70s to change the name of the street from 9th Street to M.L. King Boulevard, M.L. King Jr. Boulevard. Anybody remember that? Apparently it was a big deal. There was a lot of people. It was kind of getting scary. And the big person who was saying no, don't want to make that change, was Tommy Leptin. Now, I'm sure most of you here are familiar with the Leptin family, which is kind of revered, or at least was, because most of them are gone now, was revered as sort of the key family, the richest family, the top of the pyramid of the power structure of Chattanooga. They were 3 generations of Coca-Cola bottling, worth, what today you'd say billionaires, worth a lot of money. Made a lot more money on Coca-Cola than the people in Atlanta did. And so Tommy Leptin, who was kind of the poor cousin, I think he was only worth about $100 million, and his cousin Jack Leptin, who was the very wealthy one. Anyway, Tommy Leptin said, don't want to change the name, because he was really the pioneer, to his credit, the first person to really take a risk and do something in downtown that was decaying and deteriorating, and nobody would take a risk down here. So he built the Talon Building and the Crystal Building. And he was taking a risk. He was laying out a lot of money for it. And he was concerned back then that if you changed the name of the street, that investors and people who wanted to locate and have that building as their address would not want an address that said MLK Boulevard. He just wanted to stick with 9th Street. And he wasn't, you can hear the arguments, can't you? This isn't about race or anything. This is just about business. I just want to have, I got to fill this building. So he stopped it, and there was 4 city councilmen, 5 city councilmen, sorry, and it was, I can't remember now. I told you it's been 10 years. It's either 5-0 or 4-1, I forget. But large majority were saying we're not going to change the name of the street. And it was getting worse and worse, and there was big crowds and near rioting. And so Jack Leptin, who was a big golfer, he built the honors course, one of the best courses in the world. He jetted over to Pebble Beach Country Club in California, Northern California. What's that area called? Starts with an M, Monterey. He was over in Monterey playing Pebble Beach, living the life, pulls out a San Francisco newspaper or something, sees a headline from Chattanooga. Leptin says, do not change the name to Martin Luther King Boulevard. And he was like, what? And his name was being besmirched because of his cousin. So Walter Williams, the African-American judge, told me this story, but he said, so Jack Leptin made a phone call. He said, one phone call. Called one of the city councilmen and said, change the name. And the next day they voted 5-0 to change the name to Martin Luther King Boulevard. So that is one anecdote where I would suggest to you that there is a power structure. There was a power structure. It had some influence. Total, no. Significant, yes. One of the many stories I heard, or one of the things I heard many times, was the story about Dr. James Fowl, who was the Presbyterian pastor of the First Presbyterian Church, Keynote Church. And he used to be a member of this club. Well, he was a big charitable guy, so yeah. I heard it from so many different people that I interviewed that he would gather all the rich guys in the room because they all went to his church. And he'd say, all right, boys, all the money's in this room. We got to raise, today it'd be like $12 million. We got to raise $12 million. Who's going to give the biggest part? And he'd just go through it, and he'd raise the money right there, and then they'd go. And so the project would be over. And so that was the Chattanooga power structure. They'd get together, a few in a room, figure it out, and then go on and do something else. And then there's a lot of other stories, some not so benign, that would suggest to you that Chattanooga did have a unique power structure. But Chattanooga had unusual amount of wealth for just a mid-sized city. We had more foundational wealth per capita than any other city in the country for until like the last 15 years. We had more foundational money than Atlanta for many. We still might. Chattanooga, very unique, and you guys have probably heard this statistic, but per capita, the largest charitable giving, largest percentage of giving to the United Way. That was a big deal. So a lot of interesting things about Chattanooga and its power structure. A lot of them aren't so benign, but that gives you a sense. Okay. Let's talk about arguments for why there might not be such a powerful power structure in Chattanooga. Because some think, yes, there is. Some think, no, not really. It doesn't work that way. Some say it used to be pretty bad back in the day, but it's not as bad anymore, or not as good anymore, however you look at it. I tend to go with that. I think it used to be quite a bit more significant back in the day. But Zach Wamp tells a story. Before I tell you that story, 3 or 4 of the sons of captains of industry told me a story that confirmed when I used to say this in the Chattanooga Facts, I was labeled conspiracy theorist. Oh, that's ridiculous. But we would write and hearken unto the fact that one of the reasons Chattanooga did not grow as a city like it should have, like its counterparts, Atlanta, Birmingham, etc., is because the captains of industry did not want the city to grow because they didn't want to pay their workers higher wages. Because more people coming, growth, the whole thing. So that was a conspiracy theory that was out there. Well, several of the sons of those captains told me that was exactly the case. They'd have meetings in the boardrooms, and their fathers would say exactly that. And when they got to be of age, who were they? I know Frank and Pat Brock were 2 of them that talked about it. And there was a couple more. I wish I could name one more. But they confirmed this. This was the case. So when they got to be of age, they started switching hats and saying, we got to grow as a city. We've got to grow. And they started getting involved in this push that many of you all are aware of, the Renaissance of Chattanooga and all that. I'm not going to get into all the details. That's a story that's been told a lot. So that's the story about how it was bad in the 40s, 50s, 30s, and the power structure didn't become quite as bad in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Another story that Zach Wamp told me that I thought was a great story was, of course, he ran for Congress. He ran in 1992, I believe is the right date, before he got elected in 1994 His first race, he almost won, but somebody had a really great picture of him when he went to jail. And so he didn't quite win the first time around, but he ran a heck of a race. He raised a lot of money, and he came very, very close. Well, he didn't know Jack Lipton. And he walked by him one day on the sidewalk right by the Mountain City Club. He knew who Jack Lipton was, and so it was right after this campaign, and he said, "Hello, Mr. Lipton." And Jack Lipton said, "Hi, Zach." He said, "You did a good job." And that was it. And the next year around, he might have gotten some kind of nice gift from Jack Lipton since he knew him, and at that point. But the point being, and Zach's point, which is well founded, is that he won a seat in the United States Congress with no help from the power structure. So they don't control everything. They do have some influence. They do have some control, more control maybe than some gathering of elite private families in other cities. But they don't have total control. Now, I will tell you that the conclusion of my book, it's not blatant, it's not red lights flashing, but I sort of conclude in my book that overall, Chattanooga is blessed to have a power structure. We're blessed to have many families of unusual wealth. For a lot of reasons. I'm a card-carrying conservative, and I just think that whenever you have wealth in private hands rather than government hands, that's probably always a good thing. So that's one good reason. Another reason is because of how philanthropical and giving those families have been, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more in a minute. But overall, it's been good. Is there a bad side? Sure, there's a bad side to everything. But we're blessed to have these families. All right, let's take a little turn here. Have some fun. So we've got our micro test, Chattanooga, on the question of, is there a power structure and are they good or bad? So let's take that and let's talk a little bit about the world. Does the world have a power structure? And is it good or bad? What do you think? A lot of talk out there, right? About the elites, the Illuminati. What's the other word you get? I don't know. What's that? George Soros. So yeah, and his buddies. Yeah, I mean, that same question globally, right? Like we've had the same question we had here in Chattanooga. So is there one? I'd say yes, to some degree. So let's talk about that a little bit. Any evidence for a elite group of people that sort of call the shots?
Peter Bird.
Yeah, if you're looking at world gatherings, the chief targets are the Bilderberg Group, what's the group of Bohemian Grove over there in Northern California, San Francisco, and then there's one more, the Davos, I guess, is the kind of the big three meetings of this kind of stuff. But hardcore documented, I don't know if we can call it evidence, but hearkening unto this idea, sure. Anybody remember something interesting that Dwight Eisenhower told us in 1960? He gave us his farewell speech where he warned us about the military-industrial complex. I think I've got the quote here so I can find it. Quote, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." So Ike told us back in 1960 that there was a power structure. It already existed, and it's going to persist. So, yeah. All right. All right, here's an interesting story. I wish I could show you the video, but I got paper. A few days after September 11th, the video of this is maybe 3 years after September 11th, but General Wesley Clark, a four-star general who was the head of Supreme Commander of NATO at one point in the 90s, tells a story on videotape about how he was told right after 9/11 that they were going to go and invade Iraq. It's like, Iraq? What's Iraq got to do with anything? And then he came back a few days later. He said, are we really going to invade Iraq? And the man he was talking to said, yes. And he said, I don't know, let me read the quote here. He said, so he picked up a piece of paper and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense. He said, he says, this is the memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran, he said. So, and he goes on to talk about it some more. Well, a lot of that's already happened. And I think we were sort of told that the whole idea of invading Iraq was maybe a little bit more of a grassroots, deliberative kind of thing before we actually did it 2 years later after 9/11. But here's 4-star General, who was the Supreme Commander of NATO, telling us that it kind of works a little bit differently, maybe. So is there a power structure? Well, sounds like there's some evidence for it there. One more little anecdote for is there a global power structure? This is a fun one. It's a quote from David Rockefeller, who is now 101 years old. I just posted something on Facebook. He just got his 7th heart transplant. So, might be afraid to die. This is what he wrote in his memoirs, his autobiography in 2002. David Rockefeller. Kind of a long quote, but stick with me because it's worth it, okay? For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. There you go. Right there in David Rockefeller's autobiography. So is there a power structure? I think there probably is. How much power do they have? I'm not exactly sure. I write a lot about it online, and I think a lot about it. Now I'm podcasting about it, but that's a whole other story. So yes, global power structure, local power structure. Now, let's close this up by talking about what can make a power structure lean towards the good or towards the bad. And as I told you, I've sort of concluded in my book that Chattanooga's power structure was generally good and is good and has been good for Chattanooga. But why is that? Why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons you could give. I'm going to give what I think is the main one, and because of time, I can't talk about other groups and influences. But there's an exchange in my book where I'm talking to Scotty Probasco about this, and he's Scotty Probasco is Jack Leptin's brother-in-law. I'm sure most of you in the room know who Scotty Probasco is. May he rest in peace. He passed, I think, just about a year ago. Great guy. Scotty Probasco, I was asking him, well, how come Chattanooga is so philanthropic and so giving and all that kind of stuff? And he says, it's because we're the buckle of the Bible Belt. That's what I believe, and I'm sticking to it. So here's a guy who was often called the second most powerful guy in Chattanooga, Jack Leptin's brother-in-law, who believed it was the Christian influence that caused Chattanooga to be so philanthropic. I've already told you the story about James Fowl, who's the pastor of First Presbyterian Church. First Presbyterian Church is kind of like, there's like First Presbyterian Church, and then way down here is like all the other churches in Chattanooga history. And like Chattanooga city government is like way below First Presbyterian Church in terms of influence. First Presbyterian Church is arguably, in my opinion, the most powerful institution in the history of the area known as Chattanooga. And for 100 years, they only had three pastors. And I might not have those numbers exactly right. For a long period of time, many decades, they had three pastors who told all these billionaires in their church, the reason you exist is to give your money away. And I expect to see you giving your money away. They harped on giving. They harped on giving. They harped on philanthropy. And so this really, really rich church with a bunch of really, really rich people gave away a whole lot of money. Well, why did First Presbyterian have that influence? What caused that? It's one of my problems, is I'm always asking why. I keep going back and keep going back. But that's a good question. Why? Why was First Presbyterian? Why do all these pastors have this ethic? Well, the one who really laid the foundation for this kind of a mentality was the pastor of First Presbyterian Church during and after the Civil War, Reverend T.H. Macaulay. You may have heard that name. He had a couple of sons that started a school. There was another school called Baylor that started out of his house. There was another school called GPS that his daughter started. The guy was involved in a lot of things starting in Chattanooga. He's a very godly man. And he really shined a light in Chattanooga that caused a lot of good things to happen. But I'll read to you something from my book. The Reverend Dr. Thomas Hook Macaulay led such a faithful regimen of family devotions, which included his two sons that founded Macaulay School, that it stuck for over a century. His great-grandson, Alan Macaulay, anybody know Alan Macaulay, an attorney here in town? Currently an attorney at the Miller Martin Law Firm, told me their morning family devotions growing up were non-negotiable. But those later generations had it easy because Thomas Hook's dad required strict 2-a-day sessions in the 1850s. So you got this Macaulay family in the 1850s. We're having family devotions twice a day. I mean, it's non-negotiable. Well, that's a nice little anecdote to let you know how serious this family was in terms of living out their faith. And they had quite an influence on First Presbyterian Church, which had quite an influence on all the billionaire rich people, which had quite an influence on Chattanooga. So, that's one of the reasons, I would say the main reason, that Chattanooga's power structure has been more benign than, what would be the opposite word, malevolent? A positive influence and not a negative influence. So, how does that bode for our world today? Well, there is a power structure. I think it's probably growing, not lessening. Although with technology, maybe there's some hope. But I don't see the same God-fearing trend globally that we saw here locally. So I'm a little concerned about that. So I think that's something we can pray about. And I'll leave you with that. I'll read you one quote, which is a little disturbing. But there's one world leader who's not real impressed with how we're doing in terms of fearing God. Vladimir Putin, the head of Russia. Here's a quote. Many Euro-Atlantic countries have moved away from their roots, including Christian values. Policies are being pursued that place a faith in God and a belief in Satan on the same plane. This is the path to degradation. So there's one Christian world leader who is concerned about where we're headed. So all that to say, let's pray for our world, and then let's just be grateful and thankful for what has happened in Chattanooga and what a great city we have. So thank you for your time. It's great to be here.
Please be advised, this will not be your last time to speak here.
Oh,
Thank you. Can we take questions? Questions?
are there any questions?
1 o'clock?
Why are you here?
Why am I here?
Why Chattanooga?
Oh, why am I in Chattanooga? Oh, thank you for asking. I'm fifth generation Los Angeles. I think he said fifth generation Chattanoogan, but I'm not. I'm fifth generation Los Angeles on both sides. Yeah, and he did say LA? Okay, good. And of course, the Hollywood Bowl story, you heard that. And my just to give you the transition, so, then I've got these crazy liberal, progressive great-grandparents, and all that. And then my parents went to UCLA, like I told you, and they were in the they found themselves, they didn't go to church or anything, they found themselves in the very first Campus Crusade for Christ group that was ever formed, which became, if y'all don't know, is the largest Christian ministry in the world now. And it was just a group of like 30, 40 kids. And so my parents gave their life to Christ. Their lives changed. My dad, he was playing basketball for UCLA back then, believe it or not. And then he went on to seminary, and he took a pastorate in Roanoke, Virginia. And I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. By the time I got to college age, my dad had become a PCA pastor, which is the Presbyterians that believe in God. And just kidding. I'm going to get in trouble. I was doing so well until now. Why did I take questions? And so he became a PCA pastor, and Covenant College is the denominational college for the PCA. And so I found myself at Covenant College. Left for a little while after Covenant, but kind of have been here ever since, 35 years. So it's become my hometown, obviously. So here's the book, Old Money, New South. It's out of print. It's a great big thick old book. It took me 5 years to write. It was a labor of love, and was received quite well, and sold, I guess, over 5,000 copies just in Chattanooga. It's out of print, so I don't really sell them. If you go to Amazon, they charge like $125, and people actually buy them. This is a paperback. I've got 2 paperbacks that I'll sell for $50, and I've got 2 hardbacks that I'll sell for $100 each. So if anybody is feeling that excited about this book, and apparently there are a lot of people who are, then you can buy one of these.
Why is it out of print?
Because I ran out of money. That's a short version. It really needs to be in print, and I'm glad you asked the question. I'm being cheeky. We had a flood in our basement in Belvoir, where my wife and I live, and it was in the 3rd reprint, and we had the largest flood in 30 years, and all the books got destroyed. And insurance covers everything except what happens to you. So couldn't get the insurance for it, and so since then it's been out of print. It really ought to be in print, and I'm a really good starter and not so good of a finisher, and so I haven't approached like local foundations or people like that who probably want to see it get into print. It costs about $10,000 to get it in print and be self-perpetuating again. So if anybody wants to make that one of your charities, because it is under a nonprofit. The book is so. Okay. But I thank you for the question. And by the way, I forgot that when I first got up here, I just wanted to say I'm just hearing a bit about Civitans and what you guys do, and I'm extremely impressed. Thank you for what you're doing in the community. Jesus said, if you do this to the least of these, the most vulnerable in our community, then you're doing it to me. I'm a very devout Christian, and I'm guessing that many people in this room are following out the commands of Jesus a lot better than I am. So I just want to commend you and thank you for what you're doing. More books. I've got one of these to sell. 1995. Get a nickel off. America's Trail of Tears. This is about the Cherokee removal west. It's a fascinating saga about 3 chiefs here in the Chattanooga area that felt like they needed to sign a treaty with Andrew Jackson in order to save the tribe from being annihilated. And they felt like if they did that, they were probably going to get killed for it. They were all 3 killed in the same night 3 months later. They said they did it for their people. And some people argue that this is why the Cherokees still exist today. Some people hate what they did. It's still a very, very passionate issue. So I got one of these. This is the movie that was mentioned. I've got several DVDs of this for $10, so I can sell a bunch of these. This premiered at the Chattanooga IMAX Theater a year and a half ago. It's about my great-grandparents. They were radicals, socialists, advocates of free sex at the turn of the century in Hollywood. He was a doctor and his wife. And they were quite the couple. hung out with some of the most radical people of the 20th century: Clarence Darrow, Emma Goldman, Margaret Sanger, and their lives kind of spun out of control and kind of got bad at the end. And so for me, it's a morality tale, but it's a fascinating story, and feel free to get one of these. I got a bunch of these too. That's why I'm letting you know that you can. I don't have too many books to sell because a lot of them are out of print. But this is a book I wrote for my mother, and it's called "The Liberation of a Resentful Wife," and she tells her story about her marriage. Who was the gentleman who spoke a minute ago? Said he went to UCLA. Right there, yes. My parents went to UCLA about the same time you did, mid-50s, early 50s. Yeah, and so they talk about their story in this. My father was a preacher, was preaching to his congregation in Orlando, Florida, coming back from being a missionary. And he was 69 years old, and he was preaching on his favorite verse, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." And right before the end of the sermon, he said, "And when I go to heaven," and he had an instant heart attack and fell down and died. And it was international news. It was on Paul Harvey, CNN, the whole thing. It was crazy. Some of you might even remember the headline. But that story's told here. And lastly, I'm so glad that everybody associated me with the Chattanooga Facts, because I spent 10 years doing that, and that was great fun, very interesting. All the news that was not fit to print. And one of my favorite little pieces that I've done over the years is a little cartoon book. It's a collection of many of the cartoons that were done in the Chattanooga Facts. My collaborator, my artist, was a world-famous artist who's now deceased, so I could reveal his name because he would never reveal his name. But we were big buddies at the coffee shop. Gordon Wetmore. Anybody know who Gordon Wetmore is? He's a world-famous portrait artist. He was the founder of the American Portrait Society, and he would only put his initials on the cartoons. He says, people pay $50,000 for my signature. I'm not going to put it on your cartoon. But we had a great time doing it. But I've got several of these books. I'll sell them for $5. So if you want one of these, cool thing to have.
All right, that's it. See you guys next week.
Woo!